It's been 4 decades since travelers could hop aboard a train in Miles City or Billings and get to Bozeman or Missoula, but passenger rail advocates are hopeful that soon could change, especially now that the Federal Railroad Administration is exploring what could be Amtrak's biggest expansion in decades. And as Stan Parker reports, some Montanans hope all this momentum could put southern Montana back on the passenger rail map.
Devin McGranahan drove 2.5 hours from Miles City to Wolf Point to board an Amtrak train. He's bound for Minneapolis.
I'm going to hang out with my girlfriend. She's from Des Moines, so she's able to drive up, and we're going to spend some time in the city.
The 15-hour journey is a long haul, but his choice to ride rather than fly is informed by some arithmetic familiar to many in rural Montana, where travel options are limited and most involve a fair bit of windshield time.
I would have been looking at driving to Billings, which is about the same distance to the airport. Flights from Billings to Minneapolis would have been leaving so early and getting back so late that I would have been staying in Billings the night before the night that I arrived. So for the same amount of driving time, I got a much more affordable ticket option.
The Empire Builder is the long-distance Amtrak route that links Chicago to Portland and Seattle. It provides a critical travel option for communities along Montana's High Line. But the southern half of Montana hasn't seen passenger rail service since Amtrak nixed its North Coast Hiawatha line in 1979, a route that succeeded the former Northern Pacific's historical path across southern Montana. But there is a growing movement to renew service along that line, led by the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority.
The Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority is a subdivision of state government. We came into existence 3 years ago, November of 2020. What we realized was that after 43 years of lacking passenger rail service in southern Montana, and basically trying the same thing and expecting different results to get it back, we needed to do something different.
Missoula County Commissioner Dave Strohmeyer is the authority's chair.
We found a 1990s era law on the books in the state of Montana that had, to our knowledge, never before been used, and it authorized counties to either establish rail authorities or multiple counties to come together and establish regional rail authorities. We are not intending to be a railroad and to run trains ourselves, but we really are that institutional and government infrastructure to make it a reality to once again see passenger rail through southern Montana.
The authority has 20 counties among its ranks, along with tribal nations, the Montana Department of Transportation, and BNSF Railway, which owns the tracks that the passenger trains would run on.
One of our signature accomplishments in the past 3 years was working with members of Congress to draft language that is now written into law in the bipartisan infrastructure law. Some of that language directs the U.S. Department of Transportation to conduct a nationwide study of restoring discontinued Amtrak routes.
The study, led by the Federal Railroad Administration, also considers the potential for brand new routes.
It is unprecedented, and this is what is truly different today than we've seen in the past.
The FRA is taking into account current traveler flow data, rural accessibility, geographic coverage, and stakeholder input.
We are doing everything in our power right now, and we have been, to make sure that we are well positioned to be at the top of the heap or near the top of the heap as far as routes recommended for restoration.
No routes have been selected yet, but the FRA has identified what it calls route segments, the conceptual building blocks for future routes. It appears the cities in southern Montana are very much on the menu, along with segments stretching south to Denver and beyond. Adding to this growing optimism for rail advocates, the 2021 infrastructure law also included $66 billion for rail projects.
That's the first time that they've authorized as much money as they did towards rail, primarily passenger rail, but also money in there for freight rail projects. This is kind of the first time to seize on this effort because generally Amtrak has kind of had a starving budget ever since its inception on May 1 of '71.
This is a welcome development for Glendive resident Barry Green. a retired locomotive engineer who has been promoting passenger rail since the late 70s.
When I first moved out here in 77, 78, we still had Greyhound here, 3 buses a day in each direction. Now all we have is 1 a day each way. We can't get to western Montana by flying without going to Billings and then Salt Lake or Denver and then a flight to Missoula or Kalispell, which makes no sense.
And Green says Montana's highline communities have even fewer options than Glendive.
They don't have the 4-lane interstate, they don't have intercity bus service. Yeah, a couple of them up there have air service, but then there's always people that, can no longer fly or drive.
Take Wolf Point, for example, a city of 2,500 on the Fort Peck Indian Reservation. Lance Forstar, a Wolf Point city councilman, says the community values its passenger rail service.
The Empire Builder and Amtrak is a great way to connect everybody to places like Wolf Point, which can be very isolated.
Tribal Executive Board member Pat Ironcloud agrees.
A lot of our families only have 1 car or no car, and they have to go and borrow cars to get to Wolf Point, to get on Amtrak, to go out to Seattle, to go out to Spokane.
Half of our enrolled members live off the reservation. So when they come home to participate in our ceremonies, our sun dances, or medicine lodge, a lot of times they utilize Amtrak. And it's great because it brings revenue into our tiny little community, which we really need.
According to a report by the Rail Passengers Association, in 2019, the Empire Builder provided $595 million in economic benefit for communities along the route, a roughly tenfold return on the federal dollars invested in it.
There's no reason to think that the attractiveness and the popularity of passenger rail service in southern Montana would be any less than what we experience along the sparsely populated High Line.
There is some fear among Highline counties that Amtrak wouldn't run 2 lines in Montana, meaning the revival of the southern route could doom the Empire Builder. Amtrak, however, maintains that it is not interested in eliminating or changing any existing routes. All the conversations now are only about adding service. Those conversations are informed in part by how much local communities want passenger rail. The Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority has been collecting that sort of feedback during meetings around the state. The Montana Healthcare Foundation funded some of them, like this gathering on the Crow Reservation back in July.
Today, your input is really, really important because we will take the results of this study directly into the agency research that came through the direction from Congress, clear to the White House.
Economic potential was the primary focus, and State Representative Sharon Stewart Paragoy also highlighted the diplomatic importance passenger rail once held for the Crow people.
We've done it in the past, is to be able to ride from Crow to Washington, D.C. Delegations would go to D.C. for meetings, and so, and being able to access that.
And there's the nostalgia factor. She remembers taking the train to Billings as a child, but now there's nothing left of the old passenger depot except an old cottonwood tree.
Just the idea of being able to get on that train and travel to Billings and be able to look around and have that adventure was really a big deal that I still remember today.
There's no question that restoring rail service in Montana would be expensive. The tracks do still exist, and for the most part are maintained and currently used for freight. But the system would still need substantial upgrades to meet the goal of twice-daily service in each direction.
Adding double tracks rather than just single tracks, adding additional sidings to allow trains to pull over and pass one another. And also there's the station infrastructure.
The old Northern Pacific depots could potentially be used once again, but whether it makes sense to restore them or reclaim them from their current uses is another topic of ongoing research. Some are still used by BNSF. Some are boarded up. Others a point of community pride.
Here in my town of Missoula, Montana, we've got a train station that hasn't been used in decades. It can once again be a hub for vitality and energy, economic and social in my community.
And then there's the cost of the trains themselves.
And the unfortunate reality is with the limited number of train manufacturing plants here in the United States and around the world, even if we hit the go button today, it would take several years in order to get the trains actually fabricated and ready to roll.
I think When a lot of people hear this idea, they're going to say, well, this sounds expensive. Who's going to pay for that?
Well, first off, I oftentimes get the question, will it pay for itself? To reframe the question a little bit. And my response to that, I love this question. It will pay for itself exactly the same way as the airline industry pays for itself, as our roads and highways pay for themselves. They do not pay for themselves without public investment, in this case, federal investment. So we need to kind of just get over this notion that somehow rail, passenger rail, should be held to a different standard that we don't hold any other mode of transportation to, particularly modes of transportation that move people.
Whether the political will is there to fund such an investment is still an open question. One thing Strohmeyer is optimistic about, though, is the political diversity of the counties who've joined the authority.
Some might think, yeah, passenger rail, that's kind of a blue-colored urban thing. No, some of our earliest joiners of the authority, like a Prairie County, were interested because they have an aging population, because their constituents have to drive 175 miles to catch a plane or to seek medical services. This is important to them at a very personal level.
Adding another east-west route south of the High Line certainly would have made Richard Gaughan's journey easier. He rode 7 hours in a car from the Black Hills to board a train for his trip.
It's quite an ordeal to catch the train from where I live, so I drove up here, going to take the train to Minneapolis and visit my daughter for a week. I think a really efficient way to move people around. I mean, East Coast, they do it everywhere. I realize there's a lot more customers on the East Coast, but at some point they got to have pity for the people who live out here in the big empty.
And what he's looking forward to on the train ride?
Relaxation.
For Impact, I'm Stan Parker.
The Federal Railroad Administration plans to publish the results of the long-distance study in 2024. That will include the proposed new and restored routes and the price tag. The decision to fund any rail service expansion will ultimately be up to Congress.